Chapter 4. Through the Mirror. The room was silent. Then a voice shouted, "Hang on a minute!" It sounded as if it were a very long way away. The room was silent once more. Suddenly the little mirror hanging on the wall rippled like a pool of water. A little hand appeared, followed by a little arm. The hand and arm waved about. The hand found the pair of Wellington boots standing on the floor just below the mirror. It held the tops of the boots very tightly. The mirror rippled again. The hand, the arm, and the wellies vanished. Reece William had thought it would be very dark on the other side of the mirror. He was right. All around him was blackness. He still had a firm grip on the tiny fairy's feet. His rucksack was now on his shoulder, and his other hand hung on very tightly to his boots. Reece William wasn't sure where they were going. He didn't know how long it would take to get there either. Suddenly, Reece William felt very small and very scared. He did not know how long they had been flying when all of a sudden something happened. It felt as if someone had grabbed hold of his feet. He felt like his body was being stretched on and on, longer and longer, until Reece William thought he was going to snap in two. Pop! Whatever had been holding on to his feet suddenly let go. It was like being fired out of a cannon. His bottom half rushed to catch up with his top half like a piece of elastic. Up ahead he could see a very bright light. It was so bright that Reece William had to close his eyes tight shut. "Hold on tight," shouted a teeny voice. "We're going in." Reece William risked a peep. Ahead of them the light had got even brighter, and then it started to ripple like water. It made Reece William think of the time Grandma had taken him to feed the ducks. It was just like the sun shining on the pond. Only this time there were no ducks and no bread. The thought of bread made Reece William feel hungry. He hoped there would be breakfast where they were going. "Here we go!" the teeny voice shouted again. They flew right into the bright light, and with a ripple and a pop came out on the other side of the mirror. Both Reece William and the tiny fairy were very tired. Reece William thought they must have been flying all night. As they came through the mirror, the fairy began to drop towards the floor. His teeny tiny wings could flap no more. Reece William dropped with him. The mirror was not very high up, so it wasn't very far to fall. Even so, the little boy and the tiny fairy crashed into a heap on the floor. They both lay on the floor, getting their breath back. Reece William had let go of the fairy, but was still clinging tightly to his Wellington boots. On the floor next to him was his little rucksack. His teddy bear Zeus's head was sticking out of the top. Reece William sat up. He looked around him in astonishment. The room they were in was so big that he could not see from one end to the other. And the walls were covered from top to bottom with mirrors. Hundreds of them, thought Reece William. No, not hundreds, there must be thousands. Reece William thought again. There must be more than thousands. Surely there must be millions. He scratched his head, looking from side to side at all the mirrors. "Where am I?" he said out loud. He heard a tiny sound coming from the floor. Looking down, he saw the tiny fairy, who was struggling to get up. Just for a moment, Reece William had forgotten all about the little fairy that had brought him here. Reece William picked the fairy up and sat him in the palm of his hand. He raised his hand up so he could have a good look at his reluctant travelling companion. The fairy looked scared to death. "Where am I?" said Reece William again. "And who exactly are you?" The fairy looked very scared. He shivered, and the tiniest tears Reece William had ever seen rolled down his cheeks. "You're in the Hall of Mirrors," the little fairy said very quietly. "And I'm Milktooth, the Tooth Fairy." The Tooth Fairy began to sob very hard, and the tears rolled even faster down his tiny cheeks. "Here," said Reece William, who did not like to see anybody cry. "You can use my sleeve if you like." The fairy stared at him wide-eyed. "It's all right," said Reece William. "Really, my mum's not here to tell you off." And he grinned at the Tooth Fairy. Through the tears, the Tooth Fairy grinned back. Then he grabbed hold of Reece William's sleeve and gave his nose a good long blow. "It's not my fault, you know," Milktooth said, still sobbing slightly. "They made me do it." Reece William put his hand to his mouth and felt the gap where his tooth used to be. In all the excitement, he had forgotten about his missing tooth. "Who's they?" Reece William asked. The little fairy began sobbing harder again. Gap and filling," the little fairy spluttered. "They work for the Duke of Decay." The last name Milktooth said in such a whisper that Reece William had to bend his head closer to hear him. "The Duke of Decay?" Reece William repeated, only much, much louder. "Shh!" Milktooth said, looking very frightened. He glanced all about him as if someone might hear. Reece William thought for a moment. "Well, if he's the one who's got my tooth, I want it back. Where can I find him, this Duke of Decay?" The little fairy turned as white as a sheet and glanced all around again at the mention of the Duke's name. "Find him! Find him!" Milktooth shrieked. "Find the Duke of Decay? Nobody goes to find the Duke of Decay." "Well, I'm going to," said Reece William firmly. "He's pinched my tooth and I want it back." Milktooth began howling and wailing, his little tears splashing in puddles on Reece William's hand. "And you can stop that at once, young man," Reece William said sternly, looking at the sobbing fairy. "Goodness," he thought, "I sound just like my mum." Milktooth stopped crying and looked nervously at Reece William. "But you can't go and find him," he said. "Nobody knows where to find him." "Do you mean nobody?" Reece William said, his voice getting louder. "Somebody must know where the scoundrel is." Reece William glared at the fairy, who sank even lower into the palm of his hand and shrugged nervously. "Well," he said very quietly, "except perhaps the king." "Right then," said Reece William, "take me to see the king."